for joining us at the Better People podcast. I'm Holly DePalma, your host for today, and my guest is Jillian Bernstein. Jillian is the VP of HR at IQ Solutions in the DC metro area. Welcome, Jillian.
Thanks so much, Holly. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, thank you for joining us. I'd like to start the show with you telling us a little bit about your background and a little bit about sort of what makes you tick from an HR perspective.
Sure. Well, I did not land in HR in the traditional sense. My background actually is very analytically focused. And for a number of years, I was working in economics consulting. But what I found in the consulting field was that I loved connecting with people. I was the one who would always volunteer to take candidates out for an interview lunch or help out onboarding new hires. So when I did make the switch to HR, I leveraged the unique combination of analytics and also the interpersonal skill set to really transition to HR, and I haven't looked back. So with over 17 years in the HR field and prior experience in consulting, I learned that you really need to focus on the whole person. And that's something I love about HR. When a team member shows up to work, you need to remind yourself as an HR professional, this is where they're spending a good chunk of their week. And we really need to show care for the individual. As a wife and a mom of two, a tween and a teen, I am constantly in the throes of juggling. So I constantly keep that in the back of my mind as I'm engaging the talent on our teams. And as you mentioned, currently the VP of HR at IQ Solutions. We're a public health communications firm that creates data-driven solutions to improve the quality of life of the greater audiences out there, especially those in vulnerable communities. So we try to do the same thing internally for our team members, walk that talk of how we're supporting various audiences with public health information. We're doing the same thing for our employees. So that's why I got into HR, and that's what kind of keeps me going today, is really being there to support well-being of employees at work.
That's great. And, you know, I will tell you right before the show, our producer, Ben Hoover, who is the man behind the curtain, made a comment about, you know, we've been interviewing lots of different HR professionals. And Ben made a comment that, geez, you know, most of our guests are people who have non-traditional paths into HR. And I told him I would probably quote him. And I thought that was a great observation as he sits and listens to all these interviews. And that, you know, that really is often the case, right? That you go a different route with your career, find out that sort of the people side of things is what gets you going, right? And I really love the connection of people and data, because for how long have we, you know, been trying to help the HR community be much more data driven, and in large part, not only data driven, but we've become much more technically focused. So from that perspective, talk to me about how you leverage data and in your HR experiences and use that to help people.
Sure. So I'm a little bit of a survey nerd. So we try not to send too many surveys because then you have survey fatigue, but I do pulse checks with employees and utilize that type of data to drive the programming that we provide for engagement, whether it's wellness programming, something as simple as during the pandemic, we offered virtual wellness classes to our employees, and finding out kind of what they want and using the data for that purpose, or whether it's broader initiatives like our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiative, where we really want to get a temperature check on where employees are in their understanding of DEIB and how we can help not only support where different people are, but also bring people up who might not be as familiar with various elements of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we've done surveys on trainings and things like that that really have helped shape our professional development programs at IQ. I've also used, data related to benefits. So every aspect of HR, from benefits to training to performance, and looking at, how are we positioning various employees based on, we do a lot of qualitative feedback and surveys, but kind of in our performance reviews, but we definitely look at some of that in terms of how are we positioning employees from compensation and performance at the market level, and analyzing compensation data to make sure that we're staying kind of competitive in our industry, in our market size. So I love kind of mining that data to, again, ensure that additional retention component, because I think there are so many things we know. The number one reason, sometimes after money, that people leave their jobs is because they don't maybe connect with their manager. They're not loving the environment anymore. So I think just as important as compensation is getting pulse checks from your employees on all these other elements of HR. And so it might not be the traditional number crunching sense like compensation data is, but those pulse check points are so super important too.
So you bring up a couple really interesting points. First, I want to talk about the pulse checks and surveying. And do you find that there's any hesitancy with respect to response because of the concern of anonymity?
I think I've been very fortunate. I've been at IQ for a little over 6 years now, and we have an employee population who likes to provide feedback. So I don't feel like we have had as much hesitancy. We've actually gotten, comparatively with data, like good survey responses. And I just think HR professionals need to be mindful of the quantity of surveys that they're sending and the pace of which those surveys are sending. I think pulse checks are a lot better in terms of gleaning information from your team members, as opposed to a long survey that might take even 5 to 10 minutes. People don't always have the time to click through all of the check boxes. The other thing I have started doing is really just offering, when we send these surveys, like only 4 options. So not that middle neutral option, because I really need to find out where employees' heads are on various topics. So sometimes I might just do, strongly disagree, agree, strongly agree, and never have that middle neutral option, because how else are we going to kind of form policies and shape kind of new programs or benefits if we don't really get where people's heads are on certain data points?
Interesting. So tell me about the administration of this. Do you use what platform do you use?
Sure. So we've used SurveyMonkey in the past, but we recently, a couple of years ago, transitioned to Paylocity. And I'm not going to do a whole commercial for Paylocity here, but I do love the platform. As a data nerd, I love their reporting software, and they have a really good survey module. Recently, we were doing a survey. A lot of the work we do is based to support NIH, FDA, CDC. I'm sure all acronyms that your audience probably knows very well with all the regulations these past few years. But we had to survey our employee base to find out a little bit more about their own backgrounds in the world of public health and areas, different health disciplines they may have worked at prior to coming to our company. Well, using Paylocity's survey platform, I was able to glean very quickly data related to a variety of different health disciplines, and quickly report up to our chief operating officer, hey, here's where we have all this experience. Now we can go after, some different health communication contracts because we have these experts in these fields. So Paylocity has made it super simple because it's so integrated, and employees know it very well for their payroll, for their reviews, their benefits open enrollment, and now they do surveys through it.
That's great. We are a partner. Paylocity is a partner of ours. So
That's awesome.
They'll love hearing this.
They will love this.
Yeah. And, I do lots of engagement surveys. As we spoke before we got started recording, you're a previous user of Predictive Index, and I am a Predictive Index consultant, and we have an engagement survey. It's not too long. But I was thinking as you were talking about pulse checks. So here's where my train of thought went. And I apologize if this is going to go a little scattered. So this morning I read a post on LinkedIn about somebody who did a pulse check survey and her boss got really angry. Like, don't do that. What if we can't respond? We do an engagement survey, et cetera. I'll admittedly only skimmed. But one of the things that she was saying is how pulse checks are so much more powerful in really getting what your employees want, because the notion was, or the gist of the post was, engagement surveys are a little tired. And listening to you talk about the power of pulse checks, where I started to go was engagement surveys give the business information they want. Pulse checks give you information that employees want. Maybe that's not some big revelation, but it seems like, they seem like they're the same kind of thing, but they're doing very, very different things in the workplace.
I agree. And I think it's a quick way to get some feedback in a very light lift for employees. One thing, though, that I think HR professionals can do to take it to that next level, and this is something that we're working through now, is really looking at some of your more tenured employees and conducting what stay interviews, right? Like understand and really getting the quality feedback and that detail, and digging in on, what are your thoughts around this, or what are your thoughts around this policy? We're considering changing it to this. What would make you leave? That's one of my big questions, so I can get a pulse as to like why people stay. But what would make you leave? And so I think the stay interviews can really help bolster numbers that you might be getting. And sometimes people put qualitative feedback in those open text boxes and surveys, but it's having that one-on-one and making sure your team does that outreach to what I view all of our team members as clients. All of the members at IQ, all 200 plus employees that we have, they're my clients. I'm not doing my job if I'm not connecting with them. And I can send surveys, people can respond. Maybe they'll respond to the pulse checks more quickly. But if I'm not connecting with them and making an effort of outreach and talking with them and kind of getting it on the ground, then I don't feel like I'm doing my job, which is why I initially got into HR, which is connecting with people.
Right. Interesting. So another question around the whole role of HR, right? So you obviously are very passionate about people and getting the information and making sure that this is, a positive experience from both the business as well as the employee. Talk to me about enablement of managers and helping them in their role of leading and managing people, and some of the work and what you've done successfully there.
Yeah. So one of my favorite trainings that we do is around coaching managers and really framing them as a coach, as opposed to just a delegator, but more as like a coach and a mentor, and thinking kind of that mindset shift as opposed to just kind of letting work flow down the pipe. So I think for us, it's all about manager engagement. And what we've done is, and this really comes from the top of the organization, is ensuring that not only our executive leadership team meets we meet weekly, but we have a senior management team, which is galvanizing all of our directors who have a much closer kind of connection with the team members on a day-to-day basis than all of the department heads. And that really ensuring that we're all meeting and that we're all on the same page and everybody understands the policies and engagements in various events, whether it's showing up to a virtual paint night that we have, which we do a lot of those types of events here because we have a fair number of folks across the US, or whether it's leading one of these different initiatives we have at the company. Each of our executives lead a variety of different initiatives, whether it's focused on innovation, people, diversity, equity, inclusion. And as I mentioned, we have executives leading 6 different work groups. And then in those work groups, we have managers who then can not only provide feedback that they're hearing from their teams, because we like the upward feedback, but also can take the information from these various topical work groups and bring it down to their employees. So from an HR perspective, I am constantly connecting with those, I would say our director tier, which is kind of that next right step below the VP tier, that is really on the ground with our team members day in and day out. And they're hearing a lot of feedback, and I'm coaching them on everything from career paths to policy changes. But it doesn't just stop with those conversations, because we're connecting on at least a monthly basis. And through these different work groups, there are so many different touch points to ensure the same message is getting out and that managers are getting coached on consistent messaging and communication to their teams.
Great. Talk to me more about these work groups. What?
Yeah, so we have 6 of them here at IQ. They're focused on, as I mentioned at the start, we're a public health communications firm. So we have a communications and marketing strategy themed 2 different work groups focused on corporate marketing and another focused on our growth as a company. From an operational perspective, we have a work group that's focused on kind of modernizing our operations. So as I mentioned, we're a little over 200 people. And I feel like that between 2 and 500, you're really finding that you can't kind of do the same processes when you are maybe 80 to 100 employees, but you're not yet over 500. So you have to start thinking innovatively about the systems you're using and things like that. So we have a focused group on operations modernization, hence our transition to Paylocity a few years ago. The people work group, which I am in, and we're focused a lot on work-life integration and policies and training for the organization. And then we have a stream of 2 work groups that are focused on more information technology. So think, given the work that we do a lot with AI and chatbots, different innovations for our clients. And then we also have that work group on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then from all these work groups, at least with diversity, equity, inclusion, we're starting right now to spin off some affinity groups. So what do you feel your pull is? Like what's exciting to you? Do you want to be helping with different innovation work? Do you want to help with different business development opportunities? Do you want to help come up with diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging activities and get involved in the company that way? So really, this is a great way for us to outreach to our employees. And because sometimes people get so focused on the project that they're working on, this also allows them to have kind of more breadth in terms of who they're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. And again, from an HR perspective, for me, it's all about people making those connections. I am a connector. In one of the other surveys I've taken, in addition to Predictive Index, it comes out that I'm a connector. And I feel like that is so huge in terms of employee engagement and ensuring that engagement isn't like just showing up every day. It's showing up and giving that discretionary effort. And I think that that's what we need to be fostering by producing other ways employees can feel like work is home for them.
That was great. That was really interesting. So people have their jobs to do, but these work groups are more sort of internally focused opportunities to lead the business. Really interesting.
Exactly. Exactly.
So you mentioned professional development previously. And again, when you're above 500 employees, you usually have a training and development office and staff, and this is that, that size. What do you tell me what you do?
Yeah,
What opportunities do you have for your employees?
sure.
And how are you
So
creative there?
yeah, so we have through Paylocity, we are using their learning management system. So we have access to what I would call kind of the basic stock trainings that you would want for your employees from an HR perspective. So everything from anti-harassment training to cybersecurity compliance, things like that. But one thing we have found, and especially in our field, a lot of our employees, we have over 60 employees who have master's degrees or above, and so we are constantly encouraging through our tuition reimbursement program them being able to go back and add additional letters to behind their name should they want. But additionally, we also encourage certifications, and with certifications come training. So whether it's a project management professional or whether it's a Scrum Master or whether it's getting a particular training in a software, we are constantly encouraging employees through different websites that we can get these certifications. We're paying for them to go get certified. And in so doing, they're taking a variety of their own professional development classes. When we launch our performance reviews, and we have an annual performance review, and then we have two what I call check-ins. There are shorter performance reviews, but we're actually in the middle of our spring cycle right now. We talk a lot about career development. And when employees set up their goals for the year, they're required to have one professional development goal. That goal could be to participate in a business development initiative, maybe working on a proposal for NIH or something like that. Or that goal could be presenting to the senior management team about a conference someone went to and having that exposure to just internally be able to, present and maybe get over some nerves. So as people kind of identify these goals and talk with managers, then we kind of come in from an HR perspective and a training and development perspective to help support them with maybe it's a technical class, maybe it is a more soft skill focused class, and or maybe it's an opportunity internally that will help them grow in their career. Additionally, we have a consultant. She used to work at IQ, but retired, but we still lean on her for some training and bringing training in-house. We do a lot of work advancing health equity and talking. And so she'll do a lot of trainings internally on topical focus areas for our team. And given many of our employees have masters in public health or PhDs in science fields, they want these internal trainings as well. So we lean on her as well. And then I'd also like to just point out, during the pandemic, we did one of my favorite series of trainings, and it's more of a soft skill training, but we called it Building Resilience. Mm-hmm. And this was a great way for employees to come together, to connect, to build community, and talk about various topics and current events. I mean, there was everything from social justice issues that were happening to fear around the coronavirus. And it gave people a platform to talk about what was happening in the news. Additionally, it gave us a platform to educate on things like unconscious bias and other areas in the diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging sphere. So we are able to kind of leverage the connections to educate around other really socially important topics that were happening and continue to happen in the world around us.
Yeah, let's dive into this a little bit more. So tell me how, I'm assuming that this was in a remote environment, and was it, did you lead it? Was it, tell me about the nuts and bolts of this program.
Sure. So the former director of training who had retired, she kind of, during the pandemic, people weren't really going anywhere. So she and I collaborated together on this Building Resilience series. And really thought a lot about what we thought employees might need from an emotional support perspective and what they might want to be talking about. And we really built the program around that. We kind of just had one Zoom, well, we use Microsoft Teams. So we had a Teams meeting and got some ideas of where people's heads were and what they wanted to talk about. And we ended up actually having a book club on a book around unconscious bias, which generated some great conversation. And then really the Building Resilience series just kind of snowballed from there. There would be various topics in the news, and she and I would kind of create a light slide deck, but really just have conversation with the team and get thoughts where people's heads were. Because sometimes from an HR perspective, you just need to make sure you're giving people a forum to be able to talk and get things maybe off their chest. And that gets into the whole idea of like mental well-being at work too, right? Like you're seeing these news flashes come across every day, and we wanted people to have a safe forum to come together and be able to talk about things that were on their mind. And by using that, we then also used it kind of like as an education launching pad. I send out an email every Monday morning called the Corporate Services Weekly Connection. And in that connection, even if people couldn't attend, I would be able to link to the slides or whatever tidbits and articles that we were sharing and discussing at these sessions, so people could look at that at their own time. Or maybe they were not too shy and didn't want to come to that meeting, but they want to look at it, at another time. That was an option too.
Interesting. Yeah, it was. We definitely saw a blend of, we had to really pay more attention to what people were feeling and the sort of anxiety and situations that were blending work and life. And so, which I'm going to roll into my next topic of discussion, which is sort of the work and life balance. And I'll never forget, and this wasn't that long ago. It was actually 2009. And I took a new job, and my boss, when we were having the negotiation, I said something around, work-life balance, and that I had, a family, and I don't even remember how I said it, but I did have very young children at the time, and it's going to be a long story, sorry, but we had a union negotiation, and before I started, and my boss, who was the president, made absolutely clear, like, totally understand, of course, pick up your kids, whatever he said. So they asked me to come in before I started, and I did. It was a big union discussion. Like we had a contract negotiation, and in this room of executives, this is 2009. It's not 1990, right? Mm-hmm. In this room of executives, my president turned and looked at me and said, well, now that since you've accepted my offer, I can ask you, how old are your children? And I had my last child when I was 40. So he was not expecting the answer I gave him, which was that my youngest was 1. And his face dropped, bright red. And on my first day, his chief of staff said, I don't know any right way to say this to you, but I'm told that I have to remind you that it's work-life balance and work comes first.
Ooh.
Can you imagine somebody saying that today?
No, I cannot. And if I was in that moment, I probably would have burst into tears.
I did. I think I did. I was like, what is happening? What is happening?
Yeah, that's wild. I do feel like we've had such a transformation, and I don't know if it's more Gen Xers kind of coming into the ranks, but even my boss, who I report into, our chief financial officer, and he's a baby boomer, but he has been, ever since day one at IQ, I remember the first week I was there, my son had just started kindergarten and got sick in the classroom. And I was so embarrassed because it was my first week. I was like, I am so sorry, but I need to go pick up my son. And he's like, go, family, go, go, go. And I was like, I don't know that I could work anywhere else that doesn't have that. And I think if companies don't provide family first mindset, that we really are doing our employees a disservice. And again, that goes back to your employees will work really hard for you if you show them the compassion and the care that they're people. And I will never forget that. And it made me feel like, having just started the job, okay, I chose the right place,
Right. Right.
and
That's wonderful. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I didn't.
No, but look where you're landed now. It's amazing,
Exactly.
Holly. And it also
Exactly.
shows, like, I mean, how many years were between those two stories? I started at IQ in 2016. I mean, we have had to change a lot. And I
100%.
think we've had to do that even more so with the pandemic. I think about I mean, my daughter, she could do our entire new hire orientation because she was sitting right next to me as I was orienting all of these new hires virtually. I mean, we have had to be flexible with employees, so much so we shrunk our footprint during the pandemic, and all of our employees work remotely, and except a small portion, we have a warehouse as part of us shipping out some materials. But the majority of our employees work remotely, and we all come together. We just came together this week, at least twice a year, if not quarterly. And it's a great way to stay connected virtually and also have that balance in your lives where you can go to a kid's softball or soccer game during the day and get back on. That being said, I think we have to be very careful as employers. And we've recently implemented what I call the e-balance policy. It's in our handbook. And it really gets to the heart of, yes, we know everybody can be on email 24/7, but we keep our emails between 7 and 7. There we have kind of a general, like, we hope that you can respond within 24 to 48 hours to any work emails, but never when you're on vacation, never when you're on PTO, not when you're out sick, not on a weekend, not on a holiday. These are times that we want people spending with their kids. So during work hours, we know you're on, but we also understand there are appointments. There are kids' musical performances. I was at one yesterday. Like, these are things we really need to be mindful of, because I truly believe, as an HR professional, again, if you're not coaching and you're not seeing the employee as a whole person, then we're not doing our jobs as an HR
Right.
person in terms of how we're structuring policies. And I think you'll get more loyalty out of employees if you have the flexibility that if you have a 1-year-old at home and the 1-year-old isn't feeling good that day, you're going to need to stay home, and that's okay. So
Yeah. You bring up a really interesting discussion, which is as we flirt more or marry, if you will, the virtual environment, my office is right off of the family room. So when I hear the ding on my email, it's there's, back in the day when we first started working from home, like I'm sure you're still in school, but, I was like, this is a crock. Like, you can work all the time.
mhm.
And you can work all the time. And I love the idea of 7 to 7, like, and it's our policies are our policies, but our culture is how we act. And when you make sure that your executive team to begin with is not sending messages at 4 in the morning, or
Right.
you know
It has to be
we've
intentional.
all learned how to use that timer, right, on our
Yes, yes, the delayed delivery, yes. And
Clearly I haven't, because I called it a timer.
I did. It's all good. I think that's a really good point, Holly. You have to be intentional about it. And that's why we saw it getting like really carried away, and we needed to kind of make sure that people rolled back. And our typical workday is 8:30 to 5:30, assuming an hour, people take an hour for lunch, but we have early birds, we have night owls, and that's okay. We want people to work when they're able to work and juggle family priorities too. So the thought really is like, just get the email ready, send it during that window though. And
Right.
that way you can kind of feel like you did what you need to do. And then in the morning, before you run off to take your kids to school, send all those emails that you worked on last night at 10 o'clock if you want, but don't
Right.
do it then.
Right. That's great. So, Jillian, your wellness programs, I would love to hear a little bit about what you have created and the results, and talk to me about that.
Yeah. So one thing I love about IQ is that, as I mentioned earlier, we walk our talk of public health internally at the company. And one thing we have formulated is called Wellness for Life. It's a program that really focuses on employees' well-being and their health, putting that health mindset of whole person well-being at the forefront. So we not only have the traditional benefits, medical, dental, vision, disability, et cetera, but we reimburse employees for gym memberships and all that stuff. But we also have really built community through various wellness engagement activities. And I mentioned earlier, we do virtual wellness classes like yoga, and we offer Pilates and strength training, which is great. But we also have these wellness challenges on a quarterly basis. We pick an area of focus, and it is so incredible to see all the employees come together to motivate each other. And we really kicked it into high gear a few years ago, and it just really exponentially, we saw a tremendous increase in involvement, especially during the pandemic. So let me give you an example, Holly, of one of the challenges. So right now, we're actually doing 60 miles for St. Jude. So our corporate philanthropy is St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And the goal is over 6 weeks, because it takes at least 3 weeks to build a habit. But over 6 weeks, you're incorporating different activity into your daily life, either movement, or if and you need an accommodation for movement, maybe some mindfulness or deep breathing, things like that. And we are going to, as a team, we will get to 60 miles over the 6 weeks. And each activity can either be mileage based on jogging, running, swimming, or maybe doing some mindfulness for 15 minutes, which would count as a mile. And what has happened is we each have our own little tracker, but we've built community through constant motivation emails, calls. We'll do like coffee connects, things like that throughout these challenges. And it's been incredible to learn about different passions employees have, learn about different podcasts people listen to on their walks or their runs. So things like that have really been able to not only make people feel better about themselves, but then also really bridge community within the organization. We in Q1 just wrapped up our hydration challenge, where you made a goal by the end of the 6 weeks to be drinking 64 or 72 ounces of water a day. And I know your listeners can't hear or can't see this, but we sent everybody a water bottle with tracking numbers on it.
Oh, cool.
Just as, again, a lift to connect, build community, and ensure that we're infusing some health into that. So
that is fantastic. I love so I'm giggling because we are a very competitive environment in my workplace. So we're always, competing. Hey, a community goal might be good for us. I might take that away as something we could all really help each other with, rather than, trying to destroy each other's, cornhole game or something. But
I will. I mean, it's been so great. In fact, just to we have increased our participation over the year, because we've been doing this by 36%, and
that's so cool.
Been so awesome. Yeah.
A client of mine And I always bring this up as far as, as far as I'm concerned, this would be like a most amazing wellness program. Like I was like, are you hiring? When she told me about this. So we were doing some work together and I was trying to schedule a meeting and she said, oh, I'm off next Thursday and Friday. And she said, and I won't have my phone or my computer with me. And I was like, oh, that's wonderful. And she said, it's actually, I completed my corporate, our wellness program, which was something like doing it. I don't remember what it was. It was, a corporate wellness program. And what she got was 2 days paid off and they sent her to a spa. Like they paid for everything for her. I was like, oh my God.
I love it. Yes.
It's like, can I work for you?
Yes. And that is like, it is about, I mean, we haven't sent people to a spa, but we have done spa gift cards. But we do motivate with different prizes too. So whether it's a Vitamix at the end of the nutrition challenge or I might work in that spa day PTO. I kind of like that idea.
Isn't that great?
I think it's fantastic because not only are you doing something good for yourself, your body, your mind, but you're getting that true disconnect from work and the past, like, hey, you have PTO to do this. And I think that in and of itself, kind of getting back to all that balance we were talking about, really, it lifts that off someone's shoulders to have to feel like they have to be on their email or, readily available.
Exactly.
I love it.
So, awesome. So, last question. Most of our audience are young ish in their career or newish in their career, HR folks. What advice do you have? What would you, especially as somebody who was an economics major in college, and I have a daughter going to school. Here I go digressing again, but headed off to college, and I've been hiring people for 27 years, and I just want to say, like, be a thinker, be creative, be curious. And obviously there's not a lot of context to those things, but what's your guidance or your thoughts to somebody new in their career, somebody who wants a career in HR, something like that?
So I got some really good advice early on. My first job was in a more male-dominated industry, and so you had to kind of be tough. And my manager at the time said, "Just kill everyone with kindness." And I think that there's so much in this world right now that can be, causing people kind of to be agitated at various points, and even in the workplace, sometimes causing people to be on polar opposite ends of things. I would say just bring kindness to work with you every day and in your interviews and in your career. You just want to be gracious and kind. And I think that honestly will take you so far. And I think the other aspect of kindness is showing a kind of not overly eager, because that could be off-putting for some people, but like a tempered, solid eagerness to learn and to also be a little bit humble if you ever make a mistake and be like, I want to learn how to do that and do that better. And I think that goes a long way too. And not just in HR, but in any career, I think that the softer skills will take people very, very far.
Yes. Kind, eager, and humble. I love it. That's great. I thank you so much for your time, Jillian. I really enjoyed the conversation. Your very thoughtfulness approach, how you lead the HR function at your organization came through loud and clear. And appreciate your time and just really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you so much, Holly. I appreciate the opportunity to connect on your podcast, and I hope that you have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. We hope you got a ton of value out of this episode.
Before we go, we want to thank the sponsor of our show, the Mid-Atlantic Employers Association, more commonly referred to as MEA. MEA provides human resources services to hundreds of businesses across numerous industries every day, bridging gaps that restrain innovation and growth.
If you need support around people issues, reach out to meainfo.org. Better people, better outcomes.